Today, the financial markets are at a nexus between technology and trading, where speed, data, and flexible technology are all coming together. That means a lot more is flowing through the cloud and new tools for the marketplace. We're doing a deep dive with Drew Shields of Trading Technologies and Julie Armstrong of CME Group. When you guys look at the crossroads of technology today, in terms of execution, in terms of data, in terms of the flexibility of the technology that we use in our industry, kind of what's trending in your mind?
From an execution perspective, and I would say I would combine the data side with it as well, is that people are really looking for one-stop trading and one-stop data. So I think that, while people have multiple sources of data that they're procuring right across a number of exchanges, I think that they would ideally like to see everything as in, one language or one common format. It would be a better way to put it. So I think people are always kind of seeking for, exchanges to, cooperate within that regard. They're also looking for, data to be really funneled kind of through one source. And I don't mean just per se exchange data, but alternative data and other data sets. I think that they would find it beneficial to have it in a central repository. And then one-stop trading, kind of the same thing. You don't want, have to manage a multitude of applications and desktop features that, don't necessarily talk to one another. So I think people are really looking for, what I would call one-stop trading, one-stop data.
How about it, Drew? And are we looking at some more streamlining of the technology out there?
Yeah, I think the way I think of it more in the context of execution data and then flexibility is just how all those things are truly coming together. So now people who are looking to execute in a low latency manner are doing it based on models that rely on big data, machine learning, that sort of thing, which you don't really want to process in the colo. So inevitably you're leveraging flexible infrastructures like cloud technologies to do that. So I think that move towards data being the driver for trading is requiring that you kind of integrate a variety of technologies to make it as simple as possible. And I agree with Julie that in the end, people want a more simple environment, and in general, this industry has created a lot of complexity. I think as much as possible, people are trying to find ways to reduce and simplify.
You touched on the cloud. What does that mean to you? Cloud means many things to many different users of the marketplace today. From your perspective, what does that actually add up to?
Yeah, at TT, we've made a point to leverage cloud technologies. I think we were a fairly early adopter, at least in the ISV space. But we also try to just use it for what we think it's best at. We're trying to solve problems with the right solutions rather than bring a technical solution to every problem we face. So for us, the cloud is really about scaling our ability to manage and process data. We don't do anything that's in the critical path of a trade, leveraging cloud technologies, but we will use databases, machine learning capabilities, lots of analytical tools. And then we use it to host applications that aren't latency sensitive, whether it be a user administration database, a security master database, that sort of thing. So we try to push everything to the cloud that doesn't really need to be involved in anything latency sensitive or in the critical path of a trade.
Mm-hmm. And from the CME's perspective, obviously you've been spending a lot of time in recent months pushing cloud technology and using the cloud. Can you talk a little bit about that, Julie?
Yeah, so from CME Group's perspective, we've actually been engaging with cloud providers for years now. We definitely have relationships with some of the cloud providers. Very specifically, we host our historical data in the cloud. So that's a real commercial example of how we're leveraging the benefits of it. Our technology teams also leverage certain components that are a little less risky, as Drew stated, to host some of our technology as well for internal purposes. And, I think that what we're really seeing, 3-4 years ago when I was going to conferences and, engaging customers in dialogue on this, everyone just, really kind of put their hands up and said, don't even talk to me about it. Don't talk to me. It's not secure enough. It doesn't secure, private, it's not private enough for these very secure, high risk applications. And I think that we're really seeing that evolve. And in fact, today an article came out where it was talking about big banks are, a lot more comfortable with it. I think there was a case example of one of the largest ones that came out and started sharing a lot of use cases that they were leveraging the cloud. And so I think we're seeing that trend, really go towards the cloud, where security concerns were being addressed. You do have private, public, and you have hybrid options to work within the cloud. So I think we're seeing people get more comfortable with it. And I would say that CME Group, we're right now actively researching more data delivery and things in the cloud to see where the market could go.
Yeah, and I think this is, kind of speaks to that point about flexible technology. The cloud is not really just a storage facility anymore. It's really turning into something a little bit more dynamic than just that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, to Drew's point, it's application management, it's computational power, it's storage, and people can discern, I want to put this piece in the cloud and still run this over here in my safe environment, or, to their perceived safer environment. So I think that the trend is turning.
Once you get comfortable, it's not even about safe and privacy and secure, because you realize you can secure your technology wherever you put it. To me, it's really about balancing speed versus kind of scale. And when you really need to scale data processing and that sort of thing, you don't want to do that on a bunch of bare metal stuff that you're managing and maintaining. You want to outsource that as much as possible, and then really put your dollars to work where latency matters.
As we've seen, kind of the growth of big data, that's also kind of creating either opportunity or kind of a new set of challenges for firms out there. When you look at the big data area, the cloud storage and so on, what does that mean for the skill sets that we're going to need in our industry? What does it mean in terms of the resources that we're going to need in our industry to kind of continue to differentiate one from another firm?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, data roles are exploding in the industry right now, and that goes from data scientists who are analyzing and looking at the data to data procurers who are out there, in the buy sides, really in the quant funds, really looking to just procure and eat up as much data as possible.
I just recently was chatting with somebody who came out of the prop community, and they were commenting that over the last 3 or 4 years, every resume has kind of converged to one thing. Every resume in the prop space now says data scientist. It doesn't matter if they, were an ex-floor trader, or they're fresh out of school, or if, they have no background in data. They found a way to get data scientists on their resume. And I just think that's a sign of the times. I think everyone realizes that getting edge out of, squeezing nanoseconds and microseconds out of trading decisions is getting more and more difficult. And so the next edge is going to be being able to process larger amounts of data to see signals that other people can't see. It might make it a little more difficult to find good people, because if everyone is claiming the same thing, it's a little harder to maybe separate the good from the bad. But there's no doubt that everyone knows that that's where they have to go if they want a job in this space.
Yeah. And this is not a fad. This is something that's going to be part and parcel of our industry for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. Like I said, from the data scientists all the way to, market data, relationship managers, to folks on the back end, managing the storage and the processing of the data. I think it's going to just continue to get bigger and bigger. And, we're seeing that trend too in resumes coming in. And certainly that's a huge focus for my team.
In terms of software technology, this is a little bit more in your strike zone, Drew. TT has been a big proponent of HTML5 several years ago, but there's Java and Python and all kinds of languages out there. When you look at the software space and in terms of where we're going, what are your thoughts about that? And
Sure.
Kind of what's the trend?
I think some things have kind of stayed the same. On the back end for low latency technology, it's still mostly C and C++, not exclusively, but mostly. You have Java in some places as well, but that's been pretty consistent for many years now. Where we've really invested in new technology is in HTML5 and JavaScript on the front end. We were buyers 3 years ago when I don't think anyone else was really buying, and we've worked through a lot of challenges, and I understand why people were slow to adopt it, especially in the trading space. When you're building a high-performance front end for traders, it's intimidating to try to squeeze the performance you need out of those technologies. But as we've really invested there, I think the tools that you work with have evolved as well. So browser technology, Chromium containers, partners like OpenFin have all evolved over the last 3 years along with TT. And so we've really seen that you can build a high-performance front end in JavaScript. It's not straightforward. All the lessons you learned in other tech stacks may not apply, but it's possible, and it's been really exciting to see. And we're investing there because we see it as the future.
And Julie, from your perspective, it's not enough just to have the data and so on. You have to deliver that data, and I'm sure that's something that you guys are trying to figure out as well, how best to deliver that data to your customers.
Yeah, I mean, I think, CME Group has fantastic technology where we've been delivering, real-time market data of our MDP 3.0 feed for, some time now. We have different data services, i.e. the historical data, as I mentioned, from the cloud delivery, and we feel like that's a better customer experience than shipping hard drives and things that we did, in the past when you're dealing with, the tons of terabytes of data going back to the 1970s. You don't want to be shipping hard drives to people that are waiting 2 weeks. So the delivery mechanism from the cloud, S3 to S3 transfer from an SFTP site is much preferred.
And the ability to create kind of more flexible choices for your customers is also kind of built into that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a product called Data Mine, and that is the portal which customers do allow for, that's what they call up the historical data orders through. And we are looking to build on top of Data Mine for some for alternative data sources as well, where CME Group will become a reseller, from other data producers, will be resellers of alternative data, which we see is a very, very big trend, coming down the pike for many, many trading firms. And we started touching on it a little bit, but
yeah, and I think that's kind of the interesting, once again, one of the interesting cross sections that we're talking about here, because that kind of opens the door on the trading side for a whole plethora of new ideas to kind of where you're examining just the kind of data that you want, not that you just get flooded with a big library full of data. You're actually picking and choosing the data that really you want to focus on, whether it's short term, longer term, even alternative data and so on.
Yeah, I think the alternative data stuff is really unique because it's been such a rare thing for firms to have, that the more that firms like CME get involved in trying to distribute it more broadly and try to kind of democratize access to alternative data, I think it's going to have a dramatic impact. I think there's too many things in this industry where small groups kind of get priced out of the market simply because the barriers to entry are so high. The capital is there's too much capital required, and infrastructure costs are high, that sort of thing. So the more that we can get things like alternative data, which are really hard to come by for a 1, 2, 3-man trading team, the more we can make it accessible to those groups, I think you're going to see another kind of exciting evolution of democratization and kind of leveling the playing field and giving those small groups, which I think are really critical, not just for the industry, but certainly for Chicago. It's going to give them a chance to thrive again, and I think that's important for all of us here.
No, it's a good point. If I can just kind of go back to what we were talking about on resources for data, while we were talking about, there's lots of job opportunities and, folks that are really getting into that skill set. You're still seeing tons of firms. I mean, CME Group deals with commercial firms, all the, prop firms to global banks to the retail trader. And so those roles at those firms do widely vary, right? So you'll see, I've gone into many, commercial firms, for example, where I've had head of desk tell me we've got one resource for a data person, and that's it. I mean, they're computing the data, they're purchasing the data, they've got to play with the data, bring it into our trading applications. That's a lot to do for one guy, and you would expect, some of these larger firms that I'm talking to have more. And then you walk into other firms of size, and they have, a 200-person data department. So it really still does range. So I think Drew brings up an excellent point to that, and I'm very hopeful that CME Group can bring, and democratize access is the perfect way to say it, for the firms out there, and where we can also, we're going to be very specific to our markets, right, and what applies to our products best. So we're delivering those services, that are most applicable to our core. But I think, that is actually the ultimate goal is, to deliver that not to people who can get it and have hundreds of data, folks that they're employing, but folks that are on a smaller scale potentially, and some on a bigger. It's kind of going back to people that want to outsource their IT versus bring that in-house, right? It's almost the same concept from a data perspective.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, I mean, I find that flattening of the entire trading world to be really interesting. And, one of the other aspects of it is kind of not only the world's kind of getting flat, but also we're talking about the world's accessing the markets in all kinds of ways that we haven't seen until just recent years. And so if we could just touch a little bit on mobile, mobile technology, everybody knows that, hey, I'd love to have it on my phone or my tablet. Just from your perspective, where are we going with mobile? How do you guys at TT think about mobile?
So we made a point of delivering our new product via mobile from day one. There's been real uptake from users, but I do think in the end, the form factor for what we're delivering is small enough that for the most part, it's about being aware of markets when you're not at your desk. We've had a handful of traders who've actually traded some decent size through the mobile app, but even then it was because they were away and they always trade large size, so when they put in that order, it was still large. Regardless of what tool they use. We've made a point of trying to remind everyone that the same pre-trade risk tools apply everywhere. So it doesn't matter if you enter that order from mobile while you're at lunch or from your desktop. It's all going through the same back end. It's going through the same risk checks. So I don't think we need to be afraid of mobile, but I do think its utility is limited in some respects, at least for the tools we're delivering today. I think where it will become more interesting is when we can do a little more on the data reporting and kind of post-trade analysis side, where maybe we can be delivering summary data and analysis to people on mobile. Certainly for alerting, we're going to be investing in mobile. But the utility for a trader, I think, is generally limited to viewing markets, keeping track of positions in P&L when you're away.
Yeah, and I would completely agree with that. I mean, CME's got a product that is HTML5 compliant as well for mobile purposes, and I don't think we're as far along as TT is, but we're plugging along, and we do have a high demand for it. I mean, but I think it's kind of like the cloud; they're not used to it. At least in certain parts of the world where people are a little trepidatious to use their phone for that trade, there are still compliance issues from firms that they say no mobile. So that is a reality in some trading firms today that they're not allowed. So we've had customers say that. The general norm though is that everyone is moving towards that. I find it very interesting. I go to Asia quite a bit in my travels. We've been across the way together as well, and that's a market that's just blown up in mobile, and everything is done mobile payments. Everything that they look at data is consumed that way, and I actually think that the U.S. in my opinion is a bit behind in that regard, with Europe probably being somewhere in the middle. But I could be, I'm not the expert in it, but that's what I've seen in the market.
Yeah, and just one thing on mobile, just given kind of each of your answers on the topic, one of the things that it strikes me as this is as much a design issue as it is a delivery issue, and there's also a compliance issue on top of that. But I'm thinking, maybe there's the challenge for really effective mobile trading, mobile data and so on is really more is also a design issue as much as it is a delivery issue.
It is. I think one of the challenges in designing for mobile is that we're catering to a user who may run 8 monitors, 100 ladders, plus 20 charts on the desktop, and then they pick up their phone and they want the same data, and I don't think they even know the best way to consume that. So one of the things we've been working on lately is trying to find ways to start to bridge the desktop app and the mobile so that things you do, the way you arrange data in one, could be accessed from the other. And I think maybe a bringing together of the two applications will help a little bit, but there's no doubt designing on a small form factor for someone who's used to seeing hundreds of ladders on the screen at one time, it's a challenge, and I think it's something it'll keep evolving over time.
Yeah, to me, I think, just to kind of put a final point on it, is that people want to be able to go to lunch and look at their orders and, make sure that they're aware of where the market is. And, I think that it will likely evolve from there. But I'm not sure that issue in managing, the 8 screens is quite, they're not expecting that.
Okay. All right, let's wrap up. Julie, if there is one thing that is worth following, something that you guys are even thinking about investing over the next 12 months, what are you guys looking at?
Well, we have an investment arm at CME, so I'll refrain from giving any predictions on what CME would invest. But if looking at the market and seeing what do I think is going to continue to be really prolific and people will put more money into is security. I think that's always going to be something that's on the top of mind. It's never going to go away as things become more mobile and more accessible and more application. There are layers of security that people are going to be seeking to protect their IP, to protect their trades, et cetera. So I would say security if I had to just say one.
Okay, Drew.
From TT's perspective, we're going to have to keep investing in infrastructure, building our global reach and that sort of thing. So I think a large chunk of our ongoing investment will be in that core business of getting access to more markets and that sort of thing. In terms of new investment, I do think data is going to be where our focus is. I was glad to hear Julie say security. There's no doubt. I don't know that all of our customers realize how much we continue to invest in security month after month. That investment increases. I do think that's going to be a real point of investment for every firm in the industry. But for us, on top of infrastructure and security, it's data. Finding ways to take a user's data and give it back to them in new forms, new metrics, new ways of evaluating their trading decisions, of managing risk, that sort of thing, is going to be where we're really making investment for the future.
Yeah. I think this is really a nice way to wrap up because, we started the conversation talking about data. We started talking about, ease of the technology and kind of how that eases the delivery and usage of that part of the marketplace. And, here we are, kind of wrapping up, just talking about how data is really going to make the difference. Data is really going to be kind of the key differentiator and how you use that data. So it's interesting to get your perspective from the trading side as well as your perspective from the exchange side and delivering that, that core component of the marketplace. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, and maybe we'll be able to do this another time and in another year and see how we ended up.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.